All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Marina de Villiers, and welcome to today's session where we'll be exploring the ABCs of Copilot for Microsoft 365, which aims to optimize your productivity and efficiency within the Microsoft suite. So I'm a digital enablement consultant from Mint, and I focus on user adoption and change management initiatives when implementing Microsoft technology. With me, I am joined by my colleague Ntiki, and please, Ntiki, introduce yourself to our audience.
Hi there, my name is Nsiki Magwaza. I am a modern workplace consultant. I essentially work with clients to help them leverage Microsoft 365 products to improve their productivity, their collaboration, as well as their satisfaction within their team. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Nsiki. Right, so when we look at our agenda for today's session, we'll provide you with an overview of Copilot for Microsoft 365 and how it can benefit your business efficiency. Our resident Copilot specialist, Ntiki, will take us through the art of prompting and best practices to use Copilot for Microsoft 365 efficiently. And lastly, we'll be covering the common mistakes you need to be aware of and to avoid when interacting with Copilot for Microsoft 365. Throughout the session, we'll have a few poll questions that will pop up for you to answer and to make the session more engaging. You will also welcome to make use of the Q&A functionality should you have any questions. And if time permits, we'll answer the questions at the end of the presentation. Speaking of a poll, let's take a look at our first poll question. Claire's going to fire that off for us, and you'll notice it on your screen shortly. So we would like to know, how helpful do you find Copilot in improving your productivity? And if you don't make use of Copilot currently, try and guess what or how you would find Copilot to improve your productivity. So if it's, you say, very helpful, I can't do my work without it, I certainly resonate with that one. The next one is somewhat helpful, but I still struggle with writing an effective prompt. Well, then you're in the right place, because we'll be sharing some helpful tips today in how to write an effective prompt. C is I do not use Copilot yet, as I'm still exploring the value of Copilot before purchasing a license. And hopefully after today's session, you'll be closer to seeing how you can benefit from using Copilot. Okay, so once you've submitted your answer, the screen should go away, the poll screen. Okay. Switching over to a recap of Copilot, let's take a look at what is Copilot for Microsoft 365 and what do you need to know about it. In a nutshell, Copilot is a Microsoft brand for incorporating generative AI into Microsoft experiences. Copilot for Microsoft 365 is seamlessly integrated into the apps we use daily, helping us to stay in the flow of work and freeing us to focus more on the task at hand and less on the busy work. Working alongside you, Copilot for Microsoft 365 helps you to unleash creativity, unlock productivity, and up-level skills. Using natural language prompts, you are empowered to do things you've never been able to do before. Looking at some application-specific prompts, in PowerPoint, you are able to create a presentation in a heartbeat, create images, organize your slides, and expand or shorten some of the content within your presentation. In Word, you are able to create a document in a flash, edit a document, and summarize lengthy documents. In Excel, Copilot can help you understand a formula, remove, highlight, or arrange some of the data, and also analyze data. In Teams, Copilot can help you catch up on current discussions during a meeting and also summarize recent interactions. In Outlook, Copilot can help you to draft an email very quickly, summarize very lengthy email threads, and also coach you on your writing skills. So now you might be wondering, how is this possible and how does it work? Well, Copilot for Microsoft 365 combines the power of large language models, or LLMs, with your data and in the Microsoft Graph, like your calendar, email, chats, and documents, and the Microsoft 365 apps to turn your words into the most powerful productivity tool on the planet. We know a major concern for customers is staying in control of access to business data within your organization. Copilot for Microsoft 365 utilizes Copilot's comprehensive security, compliance, privacy, and responsible AI approach, and uses the existing solutions in your tenant to ensure proper data access for groups and users. Copilot for Microsoft 365 comes with commercial data protection, which means your personal and company data is protected. Your chat prompts and responses are discarded, and no one in Microsoft can view your data, and your chat data is not used to train the LLMs used by AI. Let's have a look at another poll question. So we would like to know, which feature of Copilot do you think you'll find most useful? One that I definitely use on a daily basis is summarizing documents, drafting emails and basic documents just to get you to start off on that specific task. Generating images. I'd like to point out also that majority of the images used during this presentation have been generated by Copilot, so that's definitely a function that we use a lot. Learning new skills or getting answers to specific and complex questions. Okay, and I see the majority of the responses goes to the last one, which is getting answers to specific and complex questions. Cool stuff. Okay, and now I'm going to hand over to my colleague Ntiki to take us through the A's and B's of Copilot.
Thank you, Marina, for that great intro. I think now that we have a basic understanding of Copilot and what Copilot is, let's dive into the ABCs of Copilot, beginning with the art of prompting. First off, let's start with the question, what is a prompt? So essentially, a prompt is how you ask Copilot to do something for you. A few examples are summarize this meeting, or draft an email to my manager to schedule a discussion around my performance this last quarter. Another example is perhaps create a 5-slide presentation about the role of the South African Department of Labor, or analyze this incident report document and list the main causes of workplace accidents. The key is when thinking of a prompt, is to think of it as an unambiguous set of instructions or questions, perhaps, that you might pose to an assistant. The better your instructions, the better your end results. So you might ask yourself, well, what can I do with a prompt? Can I create a prompt for anything I want to do? And some tasks are really better suited than others for Copilots. These are tasks such as searching for information, summarization of documents, looking up knowledge, editing existing documents, and those sorts of tasks. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that Copilot can only access what you already have access to. So, for example, I can't ask Copilot, what are Marina's top 10 dog breeds that she wants to buy if Marina has only made that as a private document. I don't have access to that document, so Copilot can't help me with reading that document. Copilot's abilities are also constantly expanding, so there's heavy investment and development from Microsoft. So new features are constantly under development and are being rolled out each day. With that said, let's look at some more concrete examples. Now, as we go through these examples, I think and through the rest of this webinar as well, I'd like you to please just think of some of your own day-to-day activities and reflect on, some of your own use cases and how you might leverage Copilot within your day-to-day work. Now, some of the activities that Copilot can excel at are catch-up. So, for example, in a meeting, asking what questions were asked during the meeting. This is very useful if you join a meeting late, for example, or if it's been quite an extensive meeting and you need to get a bit of a summary of what's happened within that meeting. Another catch-up activity is you can ask what action points were raised so far. Copilot will then retrieve and summarize all of that information for you, providing references to that specific point within the meeting. Copilot's also very good at summarizing information. So, for example, in a long email thread where multiple points have been discussed, you can ask Copilot to simply summarize this email thread. You can also ask Copilot outside of an email thread in perhaps a lengthy document to say, please summarize this document into 10 bullet points. This allows you to quickly take large amounts of information and distill it down into something that's very readable and understandable. Copilot's also very good at creating content. For example, you could create a brief presentation about the benefits of agile software development. That could be a prompt that you could pose to Copilot. Or alternatively, perhaps write an email to invite the finance team for a pizza for pizza at our offices next week, Wednesday. Copilot will go ahead and go and create that content, be it an email, be it a PowerPoint presentation or a Word document. You can also ask about information or ask about projects and concepts. For example, give me some ideas for engaging topics to discuss at the upcoming sales conference, or how does the Reserve Bank's Monetary Policy Committee set interest rates? I'll leave you to try to figure that one out. Copilot's also quite good at editing content that already exists. So, for example, revise this document to make it sound more professional or to make it sound more casual. You can also, of course, transform documents. So transform our HR policy document into a 10-point reminder guide, or transform this FAQ document into a 10-slide onboarding guide. Very good for taking content and then transforming it into another type of content that you would like to use. Above this, Copilot's lab is also available online. It essentially lists a number of different prompts that you can use if you're still not sure exactly what sorts of prompts to experiment with. You can access that on aka.ms/copilotlab. Okay. Now, if we think of, I'm going to change gears here a little bit and look at the ingredients of a prompt. So if we think of a cake, it requires specific measurements of ingredients. They need to be mixed in the right order. You need to put it into the oven for a specific period of time. And Copilot prompts are somewhat similar to that. On a side note, thankfully, Copilot is a lot more forgiving than my baking skills and decreases my stress, unlike a baking chocolate souffle, which exponentially increases my stress. Anyway, this point aside, there are specific components of the prompt which, when put together, actually create a very useful outcome for you. So these 4 components are a goal, some sort of context, expectations, and some sort of source. So the goal is really just, what response do you want from Copilot? In this specific prompt, we've asked for 3 to 5 bullet points. The context gives it a bit more framing. So why do you need it, and who's going to be involved, or who's going to be reading this document? In this case, we wanted it to prepare for a meeting with client X to discuss their phase 3 brand campaign. this helps give Copilot a bit of an idea of who to create the content for. Next, you can set your expectations. So in this case, we've asked to respond with a tone that's both friendly but authoritative as well. And then lastly, we've provided a source. So focus on emails and team chats over the last 2 weeks. You can, of course, also within your source reference a specific file within your prompt. And then when all of these ingredients are combined, they provide Copilot the best chance of finding, interpreting, and producing exactly the content that you need. Now that we've done with the art of prompting, let's move on to the best practices. So a tool is powerful when put in the hands of someone with the right knowledge of how to use it, and Copilot very much falls into that vein. In the next section, we're going to look at some of the best practices for using Copilot. So first off, something to understand is the role of Copilot in your activity. And you definitely need to think of approaching Copilots from the view of it being much like a helpful coworker or an eager assistant that wants to help you with all of your work. So what I mean by this is, for example, when you put together your prompts, framing them in such a way where you use a conversational tone. So, hi, please help me with putting together these documents. I need something that fulfills these specific requirements. It doesn't have to be overly complicated in terms of how you communicate there. Copilot's also really great for bouncing ideas off of. If you have an idea that you've started with, but you need to expand that idea, you can definitely put together the brief document that you've started with and then ask Copilot for some expansion on that same document to expand on some of the ideas, to highlight points that maybe need a little bit more refinement. And then lastly, you can also use it as a quick start draft for inspiration, kind of like brainstorming. So for example, you're staring at a blank page. You don't know where to go from here. You can start off with a quick prompt of, I need to get these deliverables out. I'm looking for ideas about X, Y, and Z. And Copilot will be able to just give you that first spark of creativity that you might need to allow the sort of creative juices to flow, as it were. Now, with that said, Copilot is a tool and it is not perfect. So Copilot is a predictive, generative artificial intelligence. And this makes it incredibly powerful, but at the same time, it's also not perfect. So at the end of the day, the ultimate responsibility lies with you as a user to confirm the outputs, to do your fact checking, just as you might proofread or fact check a colleague's work, for example. It's always good to, at the end of your long equation, to just go back and double check that you plugged in the right numbers, for example. And then after producing a draft, you always want to just verify the outputs and see that it's what you expect it to be. As much as Copilot can generate a lot of very useful content, it might perhaps need some refining in terms of getting it to exactly what you need it to be. So some general tips and perhaps some practical steps that you can follow for generating prompts is to regenerate prompts for variety. So if we look in the bottom left-hand corner of this slide, you'll see we've just cut off the sort of top portion of the list, but you see that Copilot's generated a list. And in the little prompt dialog box that's popped up, you can see the little keep it button. That would be if I'm satisfied for it. And just to the right of that, there's a little regenerate button. You'll also see that above that, you've got, it shows 2 of 2. We've regenerated once, so you can always go back and see your existing outputs that were generated the first time, just to see which of those work well and compare the two. Once you're satisfied with the output, you can then just select keep it, and your prompt or your output would be ready for you. The next sort of general tip I would say is to make sure that you can expand on and clarify your first prompt. So to get the most out of it, working with Copilot is often going to be an iterative activity. So not once off, one click, fire and forget activity. You'll see in the bottom right-hand side there, we have asked Copilot to generate some contents. In this case, it was, please could you help me generate 10 ideas for a company team building event? And you'll see I'd started typing within that little prompt refinement box there. This is a good start, but please only suggest outdoor activities that cater to 200+ people. So here, Copilot will then go and refine the content, perhaps remove some items like escape rooms, because those don't cater to, to large audiences, and then go and refine the detail to get you a little bit further down the path. Just thinking of our poll that we had earlier, when it came to getting answers to specific and complex questions, this can also be where you can have a bit of back and forth with Copilot. You can provide more details and really hone in to the specific solution that you're trying to solve. Next, the order of sentences is important. So, for example, later parts of a prompt are more likely to be emphasized than earlier parts. You could experiment with different sentence order in order to essentially understand the impact. Perhaps to make this a bit more concrete, if we look at a context-orientated prompt versus an instruction-orientated prompt, in the context-orientated one, we would have something along the lines of, we have an important client who's worried about our environmental footprint, sorry. They have a heavy focus on ESG policies. Please write a sales email addressing these concerns. There we've provided Copilot with all the context about why it's important that they why it's important that Copilot performs a specific task. Whereas in an instruction-orientated or instruction-focused prompt, we could say, write an email invitation to XYZ client, inviting them to our sales conference. Focus on our ESG policies and positive aspects of our environmental impact. You'll notice that although the content is very similar in those two prompts, the order of those different sentences will provide quite a different output. So order of sentences is important. Moving on next to giving Copilot an out. Essentially, this is providing an alternative path. So if you don't know, saying to Copilot within your prompt, if you don't know the answer, please explicitly say so. Otherwise, Copilot will try and do all these things, try its best to provide you with all of the detail that you've asked within all of the constraints, sometimes perhaps without explicitly saying, I don't have access to that, or I'm not able to give you a completely accurate answer to that. And then lastly, I would say use a positive tone. So remembering, as a large language model, an LLM, Copilot, or that part of it, actually tends to respond better in the context of a productive, instructive, and positive tone. So keep in mind that the underlying LLM was, or it has been trained on millions of conversations, and actually picks up on the patterns and outputs that occur from friendly and productive conversations and interactions. So with that said, perhaps focus more on what to do rather than what not to do. Okay, integrating Copilot into your collaborative work approach. If we look at our modern work environments, the pace and the volume of work is essentially unlike anything we've seen before. So we're spending too much time searching for information and navigating inefficient meetings, and that leaves less time for deep thinking, for creativity, and for social collaboration. So the volume of data, emails, and chats, it's just outpaced our ability to process it all. And this is what we call digital debt. So every minute that is spent on managing this digital debt is a minute that's not spent on actual creative and productive work. And in a world where creativity is the new productivity, then digital debt it's more than an inconvenience. It's actually impacting business. There was a 2023 work trend index that was put out that saw that nearly 2 in 3 people, 64%, say that they don't have enough time and energy to do their job. And those same employees are also 3.5 times more likely to struggle with innovation and with strategic thinking. So by using Copilot, we can free up these resources to do what's really important within our day. A few last helpful hints to keep in mind, knowing Copilot's limitation. So remember that Copilot, because of the security model, is limited to your current conversation. It does not store details about that conversation, so you want to make sure that within that current conversation, you provide as much detail as possible. You want to be accurate, That's using specific language to make sure that you're understood. Instead of saying EE, you could use employment equity to be more specific. You want to always communicate clearly, essentially just paying attention to punctuation, grammar, and capitalization. Thankfully, Copilot is also somewhat forgiving. If you make typos, it's not going to throw the whole prompt out and not be able to understand you. You can also use quotation marks. This can help you really zoom in or hone in on if there are specific words or phrases that you want to be replaced or specific blocks of text that you want to be written or modified. You can put quotation marks around that to help Copilot zone in. And then lastly, you want to make sure that you always start fresh. So as we work with Copilot throughout the day, what I found is that the more I work with Copilot, the more I find myself thinking, oh, this would be something great to pose to Copilot. And whenever you're switching between different topics, you always want to use the new topic button or type in new topic, especially if you're using it in your browser, so that it can help Copilot understand that you are switching tasks from there. Last points to keep the conversation going. You've gotten started with Copilot, but where to next from here? So we've highlighted a few use cases to keep the creativity and the productivity flowing. So let's look at a few of these. We've looked at generating content ideas, starting with quite broad requests and then iteratively zoning in on specific details about that content. Getting insights on meetings. So for example, asking for a meeting recap at the end of a meeting, asking for more information, for action points, just to better understand and make sure that there's nothing that's slipping through the cracks. Copilot's also really good at storytelling. So you could frame an idea and ask Copilot to write a story about it and then progressively provide more and more detail to really shape the story that you want to tell there. Again, insights within a file, within an Excel file, for example, you could ask for specific trends. Working within a long, lengthy document, you could also ask for a summary of a 10-page document. Just to be able to cut to the chase and to gain deeper insights from all of the information. You can also use Copilot to translate between languages. You could translate specific sentences or even ask about further context about a specific dialect. If I'm not mistaken, I think there are currently 10 languages that are fully supported with Copilot, but I'm sure that will expand in future as well. And then lastly, which I think is perhaps the most relevant here, is solving technical problems. So presenting a problem and then narrowing it down and asking for step-by-step guidance. This is very useful for technical support, for example. You highlight what the user has experienced, what the setup is, and ask what should the next steps be. And Copilot will then break it down and provide you with detailed information about what to do there. Now, that was a lot of information, but I think perhaps what we can do from here is move on to another poll. Marina, could I hand it back over to you?
Right, thanks, Nsiki.
You're welcome, thanks.
So in the next poll, oh goodness, our presentation disappeared. Let's just pull that back up again. Sorry about that. So in our next poll question, we'd like to know how often do you make use of Copilot to brainstorm and explore new ideas? So the first one is I use Copilot every day to explore new ideas, and it's like having a brainstorming partner that's always on the cutting edge. The next one is either I often turn to Copilot for fresh perspectives when creating content, and it's a great way to ensure that content stays relevant and innovative. I sometimes use Copilot when I'm looking for creative boost, or especially when developing presentations. It helps me to think outside of the box. Or I rarely use Copilot, but on the occasion I do, it's been helpful to provide a starting point for research or when I'm facing writer's block. Okay, so let's jump into common mistakes that you need to be aware of and try and avoid while interacting with Copilot. And it's important to remember that Copilot is exactly that. It's working alongside you and not for you. That's why it's called Copilot and not autopilot. With that being said, using short, vague, or undescriptive prompts will not generate your desired outcomes. Instead of using a poor prompt like write something about this topic, rather use a more descriptive prompt like write a report about a specific topic, highlighting the benefits, objectives, and key features, and populate the result in a table. Don't request inappropriate or unethical content, as this goes back to the whole concept of using generative AI responsibly. Using ambiguous language or uncommon acronyms may cause Copilot to give low quality, inappropriate, or unprofessional responses. Avoid asking Copilot to do a task with conflicting or multiple pieces of information in one request, as this can lead to lower quality responses. Don't interrupt or change topics while Copilot is busy generating a response, as this could disrupt Copilot's writing process. So rather, before starting a new task, be sure to close or finish the current one, and then start the new task by writing new task. That brings us to the end of our presentation, and we thank you for your attendance.